Hey everyone, and welcome. Today, we are diving into the incredible story of how one of the world's most amazing rulebooks was born, the Constitution of India. This is a story about big ideas, intense debates, and really the creation of a modern nation. So let's get right into it. I mean, just think about that for a second. A huge, incredibly diverse country has just won its freedom. How on earth do you create one single document that can bring everyone together, protect their rights, and map out a path for the future? That was the unbelievable challenge facing India's leaders. So here's our roadmap. We'll look at why a constitution is so important in the first place, then we'll meet the people who actually built it. We'll get into the core ideals that drove them, see just how much work went into the final document, and then we'll solve that classic puzzle, why January 26th is the big day. All right, first things first, you can't run a country, especially a brand new democracy, without a solid set of rules that everyone agrees on. It's not just a nice idea, it's the absolute bedrock of the entire system. And that's exactly what a constitution is. Think of it as the supreme law of the land, the ultimate rule book. It does a few really critical things. It lays out the rights and responsibilities of every single citizen, it draws clear lines for what the government can and cannot do, and it makes sure that power is never abused. The whole point is to ensure the country runs smoothly for the good of its people. So who do you get to write this master document? Well, this couldn't be a job for just a few people. You needed a group that truly represented the voice of the entire nation. The group that took on this massive task was called the Constituent Assembly. And check out this number. Initially, for a still undivided India, there were 389 members. And these weren't just picked out of a hat. They were elected by provincial legislatures, making sure pretty much every corner of the country had a voice. But, of course, history had other plans. When India was partitioned in 1947, the assembly had to be reformed. Members from the areas that became Pakistan left, bringing the final number of architects for India's constitution down to 299. And this is what's so amazing, how diverse this group was. It really was a snapshot of the entire nation, with people from all different communities and with all sorts of opinions. Now, why does that matter so much? Because to write rules for a country with so many different languages, religions, and cultures, you needed all of those perspectives in the room. It meant the final document was something everyone could feel a part of. And, crucially, this included 15 incredible women who were instrumental in fighting for equality in the new India. And the person leading this brilliant, diverse group was its president, Dr. Rajendra Prasad. He was elected right at the beginning, and he was really the steady hand that guided the assembly through years of very passionate, very complex discussions. Okay, so before they could write a single rule, the assembly had to agree on the big picture. What kind of country were they trying to build? What was the vision? This was all about defining the soul of the new India. And that vision came from something called the Objectives Resolution. It was proposed by Jawaharlal Nehru, and you can think of it as the mission statement for the Constitution. It wasn't the law itself, but it was the blueprint, the set of guiding principles that everything else would be built on. And these were those core ideals, the big promises. The resolution said India would be a sovereign republic. It guaranteed justice, liberty, and equality for every single person. It promised fundamental rights for its citizens. And, really importantly, it built in protections for minorities and other marginalized groups. These weren't just fancy words. They were the pillars that would hold up the entire Constitution. So, you've got the vision. How do you turn that into a functioning legal document? Well, that's when the really detailed work began, a process that would take years of dedication and, you guessed it, a whole lot of debate. At the very center of this whole process was the drafting committee, and its chairman was the brilliant Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. He is widely and rightly known as the chief architect of the Indian Constitution. It was his committee's job to take all those ideals and debates and shape them into the final legal text. This timeline really shows you what a marathon this was. You can see the assembly first met way back in December 1946. From there, the drafting committee got to work, the first draft was put out for debate, and then, after years of discussion and changes, the final version was adopted in November 1949. And here's the key takeaway. This was not a rush job. It took 2 years, 11 months, and 17 days to finalize this document. Think about that. Almost 3 years. Every single part of it was debated, clause by clause, to make sure they were creating something that would truly last. And that brings us to our last section, which tackles a question I'm sure a lot of you have wondered about. If the Constitution was finished in November, why do we celebrate Republic Day in January?
Yeah, let's get the facts straight. The document was signed, sealed, and adopted on November 26, 1949. But we all know Republic Day is January 26th, so what gives? What happened in those 2 months in between?
Well, the answer actually goes all the way back to the freedom struggle. See, back in 1930, the Indian National Congress made this powerful declaration of Purna Swaraj, or complete independence. To make this idea stick in people's minds, they picked January 26 as a symbolic day to celebrate this goal. For years, that was considered India's Independence Day.
So, when India actually gained its freedom on August 15, 1947, the leaders wanted to make sure that the historical importance of January 26th wasn't lost. So they made a deliberate choice to bring the new constitution fully into effect on that day in 1950. It's a perfect way to remember both dates. August 15th is about freedom from British rule, and January 26th is about the beginning of India's own rule. And just to make sure we don't forget where it all started, that original date, November 26th, is now celebrated as Constitution Day in India. It's a day to honor the incredible work of the people who drafted this foundational document. And that about wraps it up. The Indian Constitution was this incredible promise, made by the generation that fought for freedom to all the generations that would come after. It's a living, breathing document, which leaves us with one final question to think about. Of all its amazing principles, justice, liberty, equality, fraternity, which one do you think matters most for India today? Thanks for joining me for this one.